Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And everybody's concentrated on food, so that's very important. So my name is Jorge Diaz, Jorge Diaz, and we'll actually talk about my name a little bit later in my talk. Just administratively, I'd like everybody to make sure you can get on the internet in the building, just using your cell, not so well. If you connect up to the Novitez network, their password is Novotel with a capital N. And so administrative, try to do that because we're going to be doing some searching in a little bit. And I want to make sure everybody's got that because otherwise it's really going to be slow. The connectivity here in the room isn't good. So the name of this presentation is, and it was interesting because Herman Ednang is the one that gave me this title. It says, Staying Highly Motivated with Caffeine, Personal Branding. And I really had a hard, and I was trying to wrap my head, what's the point of this? But I think when you're out there either selling, like how many of you are business owners? I know that you are. So we got some business owners. How many people here are only in college and not necessarily working a career job? Okay, and then so everybody else is college working or college not working? Okay, just kind of whatever, not sure.
I mean, yes, it is.
Okay, just trying to get an idea of everything. So when you're out there trying to sell, you're out there trying to look for work, and you will look for work, it's highly unmotivating to be doing all the right stuff and getting no results. And caffeine alone ain't going to do it. So, I mean, I've had my caffeine for this morning, and I can get a little bit motivated. But if I'm just seeing failure after failure after failure, I mean, that's just very demotivating. And there's a whole bunch of news out there that says, it's super hard, millennials aren't getting jobs, kids are getting out of college, it takes months and months and months to get work. And I'm here to tell you, taking the right steps, that's not true, okay? The statistics may be against you, but then again, you're not a statistic. You can take some very specific steps and really get around this. So I want to give you a short introduction intentionally because later I'm going to get into some details about me which pertains to my personal brand and how that works. So my name is Jorge Diaz. I've been running an agency called Larry Jacob Internet Marketing for since 2011. Since 2006, I've been doing it full time. Prior to that, it was my side gig to make some extra money. And then I worked for TerraMark. It was bought by Verizon. Verizon didn't think I was nearly as useful as I had been before, and I was laid off. And I had a decision to make between, do I have at it or do I get a job? And much to my wife's disappointment, I decided to have at it. First couple years were incredibly difficult. And 6 years into it, this is kind of working out. And I do not miss the corporate life at all. That's just me, right? But to go way back, so I'm 56. I got out of high school in 1981. I'm a Columbus graduate, so I'm a local boy here. Went to one of the all-boys high schools here in town. And I was big into computers. Computers in 1981 were not commonplace. Most people did not have them. There were no cell phones. Fax machines hadn't been invented yet. So we're talking about the dark ages as far as you guys are concerned. And I was just really all over, how do I understand these computers? And I went to FIU. I got into their faculty scholars program, full ride. So I was the smart kid who really knew what he was doing or knew where he was focused. And I got a computer science degree. And back then, you got a computer science degree, that was a really great way to get a job because there was a big demand for that. I ended up graduating from FIU. I got a master's degree at Purdue University in computer science and then got hired in IBM in Boca Raton. So I was there 2 years after they had invented the PC that we all now kind of take for granted. But it was a really, really exciting time to start a career. If I had graduated in 1985 instead of 1984, I would have had a really hard time getting a job. IBM, for example, stopped hiring at that time because of the slump in the economy. So I kind of, I rode the wave. Computer science was a big deal, and then they were hiring base time because there were about 10,000 employees in the Boca Raton area in 1984. So I was very fortunate to jump into a career in a great company where I had a lot of learning. So I was there 10 years. I moved to Houston in 1996, working for Compaq Computers. At the time, they were on their way to being the biggest computer company in the world. Eventually, they got bought by HP, a bunch of financial messes and stuff. I jumped into the internet in the late 90s, back when Al Gore was still calling it the information superhighway. Really got excited. I really kind of ran my career trying to kind of be on the, not the bleeding edge, but the cutting edge. So just behind the people that were taking the arrows in the back. How do I keep my career? Because I didn't want to be stagnant, right? And so what I was able to do was get a job. So I was in the internet space. The internet was crazy, about 2000, and I lost my job. I put my resume online, corporate experience with internet knowledge in 1999, and I basically posted my job, my resume online. The next morning, I couldn't keep up with emails. There were so many emails because it was like, perfect storm. I had exactly the kind of skill, and so, that was a good time. I have since lost my job 30 more times, and not in a good way. And so, I tell you this because, as cool as things are, if you're not preparing for the next thing, you're kind of toast, right? So I'll tell you a little bit about what happened in between, but right now I'm launching a brand. It's called Jorge Diaz Online, and my goal is, how do I help small business owners with their online and social media marketing? And my whole point is, how do I change their thinking by providing the right resources so that they can feel more in control and confident about their future? Because this whole online marketing thing is just a real mess. So that's a little bit about who I am. I want to get a little bit more personal in a moment, but here's what we're all up against. So this number kind of changes one way or another, but people are bombarded by 5,000 to 10,000 ads a day. Okay, our brains are designed to filter out noise by design, because if you had to handle 10,000 messages a day, there'd be an information overload. So your mind has to filter out the majority of stuff and focus only on the things that are kind of important to you. So that's like very similar. If all of a sudden you started driving a Ford Explorer, you would probably start noticing all the Ford Explorers all around you, right? Just because Ford Explorer is one of those things you've told your mind, hey, that's important to me. So that's what we're all up against. And so how do you become that thing that's noticeable? There's a book by a guy named Seth Godin, Purple Cow, Transforming Your Business by Being Remarkable. And the reason he called the book Purple Cow is because he and his family were a trip to France. They land there, they rent a car, they start driving around. They're fascinated by all the cows because there are cows everywhere. Now, after about an hour, they're just cows everywhere. They're not particularly interesting. But if you were a purple cow, you would stand out. So what we really need to do, both as companies and more importantly as people, is how do we become remarkable? How do we stand out among the 10,000 messages that people are dealing with all the time? And so when you're thinking about, I need a job, or I need to sell, sound therapy, sound therapy business, how do I stand out among all the other messages that people are dealing with? And so that's our challenge. Now, let me share with you what's happened over the last 40, 50 years. Okay, post-World War, so I'm on the tail end of the boomers. 1964 is when the baby boomer generation, ended off, right? And you had a lot of people coming back from World War II. World War II really educated and gave a lot of job potential to people who wouldn't otherwise have done it. So the soldiers came back from World War II, things were better, people weren't dying in a war, and now the economy was really booming. These families were coming together, the American dream really was pulling together. And now you had companies that wanted to market to these people. It was super easy to market back then. You found a product, you had money, you put an ad on a TV station, and people bought it. It was really, really that simple. This is a great story, and it's actually from Seth Godin's book. Captain Crunch. Everybody knows Captain Crunch is, right? Okay, I love Captain Crunch. I still eat it today. Captain Crunch was the idea of an ad agency that Quaker had. And they hired the cartoonists that used to, or that created Bullwinkle and Rocky. And they said, we need a cartoon. And the guy came up with Captain Crunch. He did a whole bunch of market studies, everybody loved it. And then they said, oh, okay, we need a cereal. That's literally how they did it. And they knew that if they had a cereal, the cereal had to be good enough, right? But if they could come up with the cereal, all they needed to do was to put it on TV Saturday mornings, because that's when all the kids were up watching the cartoon, because by the way, back then there was no Cartoon Network. So kids were watching TV Saturday mornings from about 7 in the morning to about 10, 11 o'clock. And if you could put it there, then the kid would go to the store and say, Mom, I want the Captain Crunch, I want the Captain Crunch. That's literally how complicated marketing was back then.
And it tasted terrible.
I love that. But now, by the way, do a search on Captain Crunch. There are probably 20 different flavors of Captain Crunch, where back then there was Captain Crunch.
They're using recipes.
Yeah, they got cotton candy. It's ridiculous what they've done, right? So, you wanted stuff that you could sell to the masses. Philadelphia cream cheese is not made of Philadelphia. They wanted something that sounded U.S., it's actually from a company out of Illinois, and it's a generic cream cheese. And they marketed, and everybody said, I want the Philadelphia brand. That's literally how it happened. So as you come up and you go from the 50s, 60s into the 70s, if you had a product and you had a budget, you marketed it and sold. Okay? Advertising agencies made $1 gazillion, and it was very focused like that. Now, if you were a little guy that had, the Me Too Captain Crunch, good luck, because unless you had a massive budget, you couldn't get enough airtime to make it worth your while. Okay? So, when I start looking now into the 1970s, we start moving into choice. If I give people more options, more choices, I can get my foot in the market. If I want to compete against Captain Crunch, I'm going to come up and have a competing type of cereal, and I'll create more than one. And a bunch of major brands were toppled at the time. So you had someone like, believe it or not, in the early 70s, Schlitz beer was what people drank. Okay? Michelob, which is Budweiser's kind of secondary brand that they kind of revived a little bit with the Michelob Ultra, that's what everybody drank, right? Pabst Blue Ribbon was not the beer that poor people drank, okay? But people like Light Beer from Miller came on board, gave different choices, added image and positioning to it, and they really started eating up the market. And that's why we saw a lot of big brands topple. The whole Coke-Pepsi challenge started in the 1970s. Nike, with the check mark and the swoosh, started. And they started kind of a little bit of what we see now with personal branding. Michael Jordan was a big deal. They didn't come up and have the Steve Jobs, and we'll talk a little bit about that. They got a celebrity, because they didn't have someone who was worthy of being a spokesperson for the whole company. So they started using athletes, that could push different lines of their shoes. Now, what starts happening now into the 90s is people started worrying about the why. So up until now, we're talking about either product, we're talking about giving people choices. Now there's the concept of the why. Why are you doing things? So if you were around in the 1990s, and I know most of you may not have been around, there was a big deal in South Africa over apartheid. Nelson Mandela, the whole thing. People started boycotting products from South Africa. And people started caring about that. People started caring more about the environment. It's great that we've got this production and all this, but, water bottles, frankly, weren't a big deal in the 80s. They became something in the 90s, and then now move over to now. It's kind of like they're filling up our landfills, they're damaging the environment, all that stuff. People started caring about why you're doing things. And that became something that you had to think about when you were marketing your products. So think about things like Tom's shoes. A lot of people bought Tom's shoes because they were giving shoes to some kid in a third world country. And as a matter of fact, Tom got his whole thing started because he did some work overseas, and he noticed if you did not have shoes, you couldn't go to school because they wouldn't allow you to. So that was part of his mission. People said, yeah, I want to support this guy, Tom, because he's got a cause. The shoes are pretty cool too, but I want to be a part of a movement. I want it to mean something. And I think you all as millennials kind of get blamed for a lot of this, but it's just the economic, this is the trend of what's going on. People now care about certain things. Cleaning the environment, sustainability, things like that. The Me Too movement, and I think it's way long overdue, the abuse of women and stuff like that, was just put up with for so many years. And people like Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey, Fox News with Pat Riley and the Roger, the guy who's at the top, they were toppled because they weren't following a norm that people thought was needed to be accepted. Right? So you have this why. Now, at this point, we're really moving a lot. I mean, things are developing much faster. The real thing that people are looking for today, and this is kind of something that started in the last couple of years and will probably be a trend through 2030, is not so much the why, but the who. Who am I doing business with? Because people don't do business with businesses. They do business with people, right? I want to know who the guy is on the other side. So that becomes very important. And it's not that the why doesn't matter. The why is assumed. The who had better have a why attached to it, or the who doesn't matter. I mean, I may notice the who, but I don't like the who because his why is no good. So that's where this emerging of this personal brand becomes really, really important. And a big advantage, because now, in order for me to get a product on the market, in order for me to be noticed as a possible candidate for a job, okay, I don't have to have that big marketing budget. I just have to have a who that people can identify with. Okay, and keep in mind, I don't need to have 20,000 customers. I mean, in a business my size, I can do really well with 15 good customers. So I don't need that many, but I need them to be extremely well aligned with what it is that I'm interested in. So let's start talking about personal brand. Now, if I go back to my IBM days, and this is 1984 to 1994, I could not, there was no internet, but if I published anything, it had to go through legal approvals, reviews, compliance, censoring. If I published something without going through process, I could lose my job easily, right? So this has been a real big change where the recommendation for me as a marketing professional to firms is take advantage of all the people in your organizations and what their brand could bring to the company brand. You're putting, it's flipping things over. So when you have a viejo, an old guy at the top going, hold on a second, we're going to lose control. What's that kid actually going to say about our company? Is it going to be positive? Is it going to be negative, right? Okay, but what's the alternative? The alternative is that someone else gets more attention, more purple cow remarkability, because there's that many more people that can be seen. So, I mean, given where you're working, just be careful. I don't want you guys losing your job because I was doing what that guy George told me at that conference. Okay? So, you have to follow the norms. But, like, for example, we were talking yesterday, and I forget your name because it's hard to pronounce. That one. Okay. So we were talking yesterday. She works for Texas Instruments, and she sells watches. You've got a watch business. Very cool because Texas Instruments isn't going to come after you going, oh, you got a conflict of interest. It's like they're not really big into the watches, although back in the past they used to do the Texas Instrument Casio-like watches. But you're probably cool there. So again, it's two separate things. You're probably not messing, on dangerous waters. So who are you? And then hopefully you can work for a business that sees this. Now, I was talking yesterday with Enrique Perez. He was one of the marketing guys with us. And they actually have attempted to do that, but they can't get people to buy into it. And that has more to do with the culture. It's a really change in the way you think. But let's start thinking about your brand. Now, I asked you guys to go in and do, set up your phone so that you can search on this. So let's all search Hernan Mayor. Just because this guy is like everywhere. He has got a social media profile like very few people that I know. Okay? You check him out, you know who he is. You know what he stands for. He's associated with different companies. You may find something about the work he does, but probably not. And if it does, it's because it's probably in your LinkedIn profile or something. So when you are looking for work, people will get your resume. And the minute they show even any interest, it's like, oh, the rest of this resume is bullshit anyway. Let me go and see what's up with this person. And they're going to search for you. Now, this is something I had to change years back. I used to have 3 different photos. And by the way, the reason I'm dressed up a little bit better today is because I got Josh, who's a friend of mine, taking some pictures, and I need some headshots and speaker shots and stuff. So I go, let me at least look good, right? But I used to have pictures, and I had a coach of mine look at my LinkedIn profile, my website picture, my Facebook picture, and they all look different. I go, George, you look like 3 different people. So people see my profile, and it doesn't look like the same. I mean, it looks kind of like the same guy, but they were taken at different times, different places. And so, I grew a beard within the last year, and now I got to take pictures because none of my pictures online, except for like one, have a beard. So consistency is very important because you want people, if they're doing a search on you, that if they do come up with a match, that at least the pictures look like the same person, and they don't think they maybe hit different people that kind of look the same. So that's just like a real basic thing. When people are searching for you, because LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the social media profiles, YouTube, by the way, is another big one. You want to make sure that you have a very consistent footprint so that if people find one of your things, they're always seeing the same kind of message. Now, LinkedIn lends itself a lot to, what's your career about, what have you done? So that's kind of like the no-brainer. It's very resume-like, and that's a good thing for your brand. But what can you do for your Facebook, which a lot of you probably use, although you guys are younger, so maybe it's more Instagram. What can you do about your Facebook and your Instagram channels to make them describe a little bit more about what you would want your brand to say? So, for example, people might go to, you don't have to show your whole job history in Facebook, but if you do have, for example, involvement in charity, nonprofit work, maybe that's the way you kind of embellish a little bit about it there. What can you do in other places so that if people are checking you out, they can kind of make an opinion, an impression, because who is really important? If I'm hiring someone, they went to the school, you're going to find that from the resume. Yeah, they're probably about this age. Where did they go to school? What's their ethnicity? That's kind of important. Some people you can't ask it, but you can kind of infer from what you see online. What story do you want people to tell in their minds about you when they're learning about you? Now, come up and my name is Jorge Diaz, right? Now, we're the Miami Jorges, right? So all the Miami Jorges sometime in the 1960s became George. I don't know how it happened, but I knew growing up in high school it was George Ortega, George Mas, George Diaz. We were all Georges. That actually is kind of an interesting thing to talk about because I do very little business in Miami. People find me through search. And like I was talking with a guy on a Zoom call that we scheduled. He's from Ohio. So, Jorge, how are you? And the whole time he's Jorge. It's just he's an American, he can't pronounce Jorge. And then so towards the end of the call, I came up and I mentioned, no, because if you go to my website, georgediaz.online, you'll find he goes, oh, I'm so sorry. Your name is George, but I've been calling you Jorge. I go, no, dude, relax. That's the way you're supposed to pronounce it, but in Miami we became George. So if you go to my website in my About Us, I put George Diaz, pronounced George, like the president. And I almost laugh about it. Like, I spell it correctly. You guys don't. Why do you need a GE in there, right? So, how do you take something about you? It's like, I'm George with the J. And that's kind of something that people know me by. How do you put a story in people's head that make you more memorable? Okay, so with something very, very simple like that. Now, if you search for me, George Diaz, what you're going to find is the actor George Diaz, who's in IMDb, which, by the way, then gets you a lot of authority juice. So I talked to my search engine guy, and he goes, there's no way we're ever going to get above IMDb. But maybe we can get you in position 3 or 4 for George Diaz. Now, for years, I've been going by Jorge Lázaro Diaz, because there are very few of those guys. And if you do a search on me for Jorge Lázaro Diaz, I dominate the first 5 pages of that. And I did that by design. I used Jorge Lázaro Diaz over and over again in all my blogging, in all my YouTube videos, a lot of places. Now I purposely named my website georgediaz.online with the idea of how do I get up in search engines and become more noticeable, so as a brand, right? So search for Jorge Lázaro Diaz on your phones. No internet?
No, I said you. I don't
Yeah, you do. That's me right there.
That's you?
Yeah, those are my. By the way, when I was preparing for this talk, I looked.
Care for you,
Oh my
right?
God! Look at the ugly picture. And it's because I took this picture and my graphic artist came up and they curved out the background because they wanted to put something up, and that's the one that shows up first. So we're fixing it. That is me. That is me. So I've got to get my picture. I also don't want to be the realtor that's got the picture of the 35-year-old lady who's now 55, and it's like, oh, dude, please. So I'm trying to fix that. But if you go online, what can you find out about me? That's over than what I told you. Because I purposely left out the personal stuff. Not all at one time.
Nonprofit career advisor.
Really? Okay. What else did
Career job and jealous.
Career jockey. Okay, I got into website development because of Career Jockey. I used to be involved in a nonprofit called Back on Track. It was because I'd lost my job so many times, I was in a support group in one of our churches, and I actually started Career Jockey, and I killed myself because I let the domain expire because I wasn't using it for so many years, and now it's like, dude, I want it, but I still own the Twitter account and the Facebook page for it. But it's nonprofit work. I do a lot of career counseling. People still come to me for help with resumes and stuff just because of the history. So, good guy, he helps the community, blah, blah, blah. Anything else? Personal quirks, hobbies, can you find any of that stuff? Political affiliations? Nothing. Am I that stealth? What's it?
I would say criminal.
No, and by the way, you'd be really hard pressed to find anything criminal about me because I'm like so freaking white clean. It's terrible. So, anything in there?
Extreme exposure.
What's that?
Extreme exposure.
That's a company that interviewed me, and so I came up under them. So, by the way, getting interviewed, if you can get interviewed by anybody, it's really good. Not just because of who sees them, but if you get interviewed by anybody that has decent authority, that's really valuable because it pushes your appearance in search results higher. So that's something that's really interesting. I recently came up. I'm a certified consultant for a company called Infusionsoft, and I was at one of their partner conferences, and they had one of these booths where they're going, "Hey George, can you tell us, how you overcame some, blah blah blah?" And I go, "Yeah, sure, whatever." And so I came up, and they put me on their site. So kind of as a testimonial social proof. So one of the things that does come up for Jorge Diaz is this video of me telling my story. So now all of a sudden it's like, if you look under Jorge Diaz without the Lázaro, it's one of the few things that shows up on page one because it's a video on their site. And they're a big company, so they get a lot of, I call it search juice. So that was interesting. And it's a positive story, it's not like a bad one. So I make a point, if you follow me pretty consistently, everybody knows this, I drink wine. I'm a red wine lover. My daughter and I are really big into it. And so Fridays, I always take a picture, of course I was here last night, of me usually with my wife or a friend drinking red wine somewhere. And if I'm out of town, for sure I'm taking that picture. So my wife works for American Airlines, so we travel, I want to say incessantly, and it doesn't cost us much, which is really cool. So we go to Italy, we've been to London this year, we've been to Costa Rica, so we're traveling a lot, and if I'm traveling somewhere, I am drinking red wine. Now, if you don't like hanging out with people that drink too much or whatever, I may be pushing you away. But it's like, oh yeah, George, he's the guy that likes the red wine. Okay? If you continue to follow me closely, you will know what kind of dog I have. Okay? I have a red standard poodle. He's 9 months, está insoportable because he's a very hyper puppy now. But I'm a dog person, and you would very likely know that. Now, if you're a cat person or if you're a I hate dog person, you're not going to be attracted to me. But it always comes up. Conversations about, or someone will come up, oh, George, he's got a red poodle, right? And as a matter of fact, later this year I'm going to start training him and stuff, and I'm going to be recording videos about that, and I'll figure out a way to write a blog or record a video blog that talks about, how do you train a dog and the discipline, and something related to how you run your business more effectively, what I learned by training my dog, stuff like that. So I throw him in. I often will take videos as I'm doing, a lesson or something, and then you'll see him walking around behind me. And I do it on purpose. You know, other people go, no, get the dog out of the way. But I don't hush the dog when they're barking during my videos, because people know George has a dog. So things like that. I used to be a marathon runner. A lot of people know I'm a runner. So that's all part of my brand. Okay? In my LinkedIn, I overtly put in that I went to Christopher Columbus High School. Because in Miami, there's a pretty decent, community of us. The mayor is a Columbus grad. So private school, that kind of kid.
You mean Cole?
Yeah, it's a cool. And we beat the Leno. But that's all part of it. How do I position myself so that I attract other people? Okay? So here's what I'd like for you guys to do. Come up and partner up with someone near you. And I want you to search for the other person. So, and if you have a name like mine, try to find, help the other person come up with a search that actually brings something about you. And we're going to go around the room. I want to ask people what you can learn about that other person by searching for them.
By the way, it's in my website.
Oh, that.
It's even giving me the.
Yeah, by the way, this is I can't yeah, but good luck. It ends up popping itself in different places. No, I didn't know why. I need someone to come up and say, we should have a virgin everything. And then it's like, oh wow, you're 32! Wow, that's me. No, but if they know the teacher,
I feel like this.
oh, man, I lost it. That's out of 5. That's pretty good. Yeah, mine shows up. We just moved 2 months ago, so all the addresses are off. But it's just that. Okay, so everybody back up here. So let me ask you. Okay, everybody. So, Valentina, so you were doing the demo next week? Okay, so what do you know about him?
Now I'm going over his LinkedIn profile. Give me the rundown. He gets a hit if you misspell his name.
Oh, no.
He tells me about you. And it's all the same as well.
Yeah, by the way, so here's an example. His name is Ignacio Rivera. There is an Ignacio Rivera,
Without the I.
who is a woman. And you could potentially think that it's a cross-dresser, transgender person. So you have to understand how people might.
And people ask me the funniest questions about it. Is that your sister? I'm like, the last name is not the same, and if it was the same, why would I have a sister with the same name?
Well,
that would be super confusing.
So here's an example of something you want to be careful of. Here is mistaken identity because the names are so similar. With me, it doesn't matter because there's like 20,000 people with Jorge Diaz. It's just that they won't find mine.
All the time.
So did you two guys partner up?
Yeah.
So what did you learn about him?
About Richard, well, the thing that stands out the most is actually I love Rocky, and so he just changed one of the pictures because the Rocky trainer, what was his name? Mickey. His picture comes out next to his like professional pictures. I was like, how are you guys related? But he dabbles in computer programming. He works for City. I learned what sanctions. What is the last part? Sanctions. Like sanction screening.
Wow.
So I learned.
Which would mean
Correct. Right.
So your brand is out there, whether you like it or not. What you ought to consider is what can you do to manipulate it to your benefit, right? Because, for example, I gave a presentation similar to this one in the Homestead Correctional Institute. I do a lot of prison ministry, and they have an entrepreneurship program through Lead for Ladies. It's a group that helps the ladies as they're transitioning out. And there was one lady that came up and said, "There's a bunch of really interesting stuff about me on page 1. And she has a very unique name, so very few people are going to mix it. But she was in the news for some big fraud thing, and that's the reason she's in jail, from the Naples NBC News. And I go, that's a piece of cake. All you need to do is start a blog. Start a blog, put about 10, 3, put some YouTube videos up and make sure every single one has your name, and then you'll start pushing all the bad news over to second, third page, especially as your website gains more authority. Setting up videos in YouTube is also another really good way because YouTube has a lot of authority, and people don't realize this, but YouTube is the second largest search engine on the network, and of course Google bought them for all the right reasons. So YouTube videos carry a lot of clout, so make sure that in the description areas you put something that's searchable because that has a lot of influence on how people will see them.
So I have my YouTube channel and my business name. Where should I put my actual name?
I get this question a lot. So just because of the way I did it, am one brand. So I only have one YouTube channel. One for Larry Jacob, which is the name of my business. And then Jorge Diaz is interspersed all over the place. So you can't keep them together. As I've launched Jorge Diaz Online, I've purposely created a separate Facebook page and a separate company page in LinkedIn. But I've kept my YouTube channel the same just because I've got hundreds and hundreds of videos in there, and starting a new one doesn't work to my advantage. So you can keep them together, you can't keep them separate. If you're really active in one of social medias, you've got to decide what do you do. Do you go all with your profile like I have? Because my Larry Jacob page on Facebook is like, I publish a lot of information, but no one ever really goes there because I haven't promoted it. People go to my profile, and my profile and my personal life are very, very intermingled by design. So you have to decide what makes the most sense. If you don't have a big presence in one of these things, start with the way that makes the most sense, like push your page for your business versus your profile, because that's where you're going to get some value, right? Like try to get an accumulation that way. Now, if that's the case, for example, on my Jorge Diaz Online Facebook page, I haven't yet started publishing personal things, and I'm trying to decide what do I want to do with that. Because at some point that might be where I provide more information of a different way. So you almost have to think about it. But from a personal branding standpoint, what you want to do is if people search for me, what impression do they get, and what can you insert in there to make you more than, I got a business degree at FIU and I have no job experience. How do you put something in there? Because, for example, having a student, my daughter, we put her to work when she was as young as possible because she was like a really sharp kid. She's 31 now, but she was really sharp, but not the most motivated kid. And so what we noticed when she's under pressure, she performed better in school. She wasn't watching as much TV and whatever. So she started working like at 16 in a movie theater. So by the time she got out of college at 22, she had 8 years, or 6 years of job history. Well, I would much prefer to hire a kid out of school that's had, 7 jobs and has been working all the time than somebody who, for example, my brother, I have a brother who's a year older than she is, and he's now graduating from med school. I mean, he's done really well. But out of college, he was invisible because he'd been playing baseball and volleyball, and that didn't show up anywhere. He couldn't really put it on his resume much. So it's like, okay, you were an athlete, so there wasn't too much. But my daughter's resume was like phenomenal, and he makes a lot more money than she does now because he's a doctor.
Can I ask a question? So we did the exercise together with Samantha.
Sam.
So nothing comes up. So I go.
So your stuff.
Yeah. So how do you feel? And I know I've talked to a lot of different people about this specific issue, and you just want to get in the fold, even if you've got bad information about you, you want to fill it up with good on top. So how do you do that?
Here's the thing. Stealth is good because you're starting with a clean slate, and you can make it whatever you want. Now, what's your name?
Samantha. Ember. Samantha Ember.
Ember.
Yes.
Good. So that you probably not too many Samantha Embers.
No, it's pretty unique, which is good. So I get like the typical information, like her all these sites will give you the birthday, the name.
Yeah, the bogus one.
Yeah.
So you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you have a Facebook profile. Yeah. So you're set up a LinkedIn profile. Boom, that'll be the first one. Then even if you don't use Facebook, set up a profile.
Yeah.
Now here's the thing.
But you're gonna get a lot of contacts, by the way. So everybody here, you want to do it like.
Now, by the way, you're in marketing, right? Or
Business hospitality.
okay, so here's something you ought to consider. People will come up and say, she's not very, she's invisible. I mean, if you were a computer science major, maybe not. But if you're, business, maybe you ought to have a profile online. So it could be perceived as a negative, like, why is there nothing out here about her? So LinkedIn, the basic profile, work on it, put a nice headshot, make sure it looks professional. It's not like, not one of those, right?
With the picture with the person cut off on one side. I see it all the time, like they're going like this.
Yeah, try to make it, somewhat professional. I mean, you can take really professional pictures with your phone in front of a nice, flat, or get Josh to take a picture of it for you. But then on Facebook, because again, Facebook is going to get you the most clout. Get that one, set up a decent profile, post a few things. You don't have to put a lot, just to go out of your way, but at least then you're not invisible. I think that's important. And then, what is it you would want people to know about you? The fact that you're working, at the Fontainebleau Hilton, that's not a bad name to drop, right? So what do you do there? You say you're in transportation. I think you have to worry about that. My first question to you was what?
Like you asked me like what you use for transportation.
No, right. What did I say? Are you I asked her, I got told, are you a bus driver?
Oh yeah.
Right? You know what I'm saying? You have to worry about that. And I'll be black girl, she's probably a bus driver. So I'm saying people have perceptions and you want to break them immediately. I run the valet program over there. I hire, whatever it is that you do, it's like, ooh, that's pretty impressive. I'm from Hilton, that's no, bumpy place. So, how do you make a big deal of that? Right? You're studying at FIU, or at Miami-Dade, you're going to continue in hospitality. So what are your aspirations? Might as well throw that in there. If you like dogs, don't throw a bunch of cat pictures, but how do you, if I met you, how do you separate yourself from the pack? Because there's going to be another dozen people whose resumes are coming on my desk. What makes you, become more interesting than the others? Yes?
So when you talk about interesting and differentiating yourself, one of the things that people always say, especially with like LinkedIn, is just posting content. Because obviously the views for the post help. So how do you come off as doing that without trying to sell yourself?
Well, okay, so I do a horrible job of selling myself online. So rarely will you come up and say, once every 10, 15 posts I'll come up and say, hey, I got a deal on a website, it's this much, we're running a sale, but it's only good to them. So very rarely. What you want to do is position yourself as an expert in some field so that people come up and say, hey, this person knows a lot about this thing, right? And it doesn't really matter what it is. For example, my daughter, she works in online marketing. She works for a company that does marketing for plumbers and air conditioning people. And so, it's interesting, it's online marketing. She started a blog called Sophie's Destination. Now, because she's related to us, she gets the same flight benefits that I get. So she's been everywhere. Right now she's in Puerto Rico. Next month she's going to be in Ireland. So she travels. So she always takes pictures of where she's at. So her blog is Sophie's Destination. And so, traveling, worldly, been to a lot of places, that's, there's a perception that's positive about that, right?
How do you keep that from sounding like more personal rather than
Well,
showing that as something?
that's the wrong question. How do you make personal more of your brand so people see it? Because you're, for example, if anybody came up and saw Sophie and said, that's pretty authentic, because Sophie has been to Italy, she has been to Puerto Rico, she has been to Costa Rica, she has been to all these places, so she's not flaunting anything that's not true. And if I was hiring someone, I would much prefer, in some fields it's like, hey, she's traveled a lot, she can talk to people about different things, versus someone who's comes offline and says, boy, this person's never been outside of Miami. So how do you work that? So, cool. So thank you very much for your time.
I didn't want to cut you off. By the way, so George is a friend of mine, and if you haven't gotten his card or his info, please get it. Obviously, he does this for a living as well, so be considerate of his time. But he's a resource for us, so make sure that you.
So you all search me. So if you guys want to partner up on Facebook, if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, feel free. I'm more than happy to help you in any way I can.
I hate listening to news and stuff, so now I've become a big podcast guy. And one of my favorite podcasts